"It's too big," she whispered, her voice trembling, as the educated black woman stepped off the dusty train into the sprawling Colorado wilderness, while the tall, weathered rancher stood frozen in stunned silence at the sight of his unexpected mail-order bride. The hostile frontier town immediately branded her an outsider, too refined, too different, destined to flee back east within days. But the guilt-ridden widower needed her more than his pride would admit. His failing ranch teetered on the edge of foreclosure, and this arrangement was his last desperate gamble. Neither realized she carried secrets in her worn leather satchel that could transform their dying dream into unimaginable prosperity, if the corrupt cattle baron watching from the shadows didn't destroy them first. Can two wounded souls forge a partnership strong enough to survive a land that judges them both unworthy of redemption? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The train's whistle echoed across the Colorado plains as Jebediah Carter adjusted his worn hat and checked his pocket watch. September 1887 had brought nothing but dust and debt to his struggling ranch. The correspondence from C. Grant had been his last hope, a mail-order bride to help salvage what remained of his life. Steam hissed from the locomotive as passengers began disembarking. Jebediah scanned the small crowd for a woman traveling alone. His breath caught when an elegantly dressed black woman stepped onto the platform, clutching a leather satchel against her chest. She looked directly at him with intelligent brown eyes. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice carried the refined accent of Eastern education. Jebediah's mouth went dry. The letters had never mentioned this. "You're C. Grant?" "Cassidy Grant." She extended a gloved hand with practiced grace. "I apologize if my appearance wasn't what you expected." The platform fell silent. Other passengers stared openly. Mrs. Henderson from the general store whispered something sharp to her husband. Jebediah felt the weight of every gaze pressing down on them both. "The wagon's this way." He took her traveling bag, noting how light it was. Everything she owned fit in 2 small cases. The ride to his ranch stretched uncomfortably long. Cassidy sat straight-backed beside him, taking in the endless expanse of prairie grass and distant mountains. Her fingers gripped the satchel tighter with each mile. "It's too big," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "What is?" "All of it. The sky, the land. Where I come from, you can't see more than a block ahead." She turned toward him. "In Philadelphia, I taught at the Riverside Academy for Girls, mathematics and literature." "You're a teacher?" "Was." Her voice carried a note of finality that discouraged further questions. The Carter Ranch appeared ahead, its weathered buildings dwarfed by the surrounding wilderness. The main house needed paint. The barn sagged slightly to one side. Cattle grazed in sparse pastures that should have been thick with grass. Pete Morrison emerged from the barn as they approached. Jebediah's only remaining ranch hand was a thick-set man with calloused hands and suspicious eyes. Those eyes narrowed considerably when he saw Cassidy. "This your new help?" Pete's tone suggested he found the situation amusing. "Mrs. Grant will be managing household affairs." Jebediah climbed down and helped Cassidy from the wagon. Pete spat into the dirt. "Household affairs. Right." He walked back toward the barn without another word. Inside the house, dust particles danced in afternoon sunlight streaming through unwashed windows. The main room contained mismatched furniture and stacks of papers covering every surface. Dirty dishes sat abandoned on the kitchen table. "When did your wife pass?" Cassidy asked gently. 2 years ago. Influenza took her and my boy both." Jebediah's voice roughened. "Haven't been much point in keeping things tidy since." Cassidy set down her satchel and surveyed the chaos. "I can see that. I'll sleep in the barn tonight, give you space to settle in." "That's not necessary." "It is." He headed for the door. "There's beans and cornbread in the kitchen. We'll figure out arrangements tomorrow." The next morning brought their first trip to town. Cassidy had cleaned herself up and put on her best dress, hoping to make a good impression. The general store buzzed with conversation that died the moment they entered. Mrs. Henderson looked up from behind the counter with barely concealed hostility. We don't extend credit to strangers. We're paying cash. Jebediah placed coins on the counter. I'm not sure we have what you're looking for. Mrs. Henderson's eyes stayed fixed on Cassidy. Flour, coffee, and lamp oil. Cassidy's voice remained steady despite the obvious rejection. Other customers whispered among themselves. A man near the door made a comment about knowing their place that wasn't quite quiet enough. Cassidy's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Outside, Jebediah loaded their meager supplies into the wagon. They'll come around. No, they won't. Cassidy climbed up beside him. But that doesn't matter. I didn't come here to make friends. Why did you come? She was quiet for a long moment. Because staying wasn't an option anymore. Back at the ranch, Cassidy began organizing the chaos that had consumed Jebediah's life. She started with the kitchen, then moved to the main room where papers lay scattered like fallen leaves. Bills, correspondence, legal documents, and receipts created layers of confusion. When did you last balance your books? She asked that evening. Jebediah looked up from his supper. Don't really keep books. Just try to remember who I owe. That's not sustainable. Cassidy held up a stack of overdue notices. You're 3 months behind on your mortgage. The bank could foreclose any time. I know. His shoulders sagged. Been trying to figure a way out. But the drought killed most of my herd. Can't make money with dead cattle. There has to be something. Cassidy returned to the papers with renewed determination. Pete appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, but attitude intact. Need to know about tomorrow's work. Check the north fence line. Some posts looked loose yesterday. Pete's attention shifted to Cassidy. She going to be giving orders now, too? Mrs. Grant is helping with administrative matters. Administrative. Pete smiled without humor. Fancy word for a fancy lady. We'll see how long this lasts. He left without waiting for a response. Cassidy continued sorting papers as if nothing had happened, but Jebediah noticed her hands shake slightly as she reached for the next document. Whatever had driven her west, it had taken considerable courage to stay. 3 days later, Pete's disrespect reached a breaking point. He returned from town with supplies but dumped them carelessly on the porch, instead of bringing them inside. When Cassidy asked him to be more careful with the flour sacks, he laughed. Don't take orders from the help. His words carried deliberate venom. Cassidy straightened to her full height. I'm not the help. I'm Mrs. Carter. Not yet, you ain't. Pete stepped closer, trying to intimidate her with his bulk. And maybe not ever, depending on how things go. Jebediah emerged from the barn, sensing trouble. Problem here? Just explaining how things work on a ranch. Pete's smile held no warmth. Things work how I say they work. Jebediah's voice carried quiet authority. Mrs. Grant has my full support in all household matters. Pete shrugged and walked away, but the message was clear. The battle lines were drawn. Sunday brought another humiliation at the small church in town. Cassidy had hoped worship might provide common ground with the community. Instead, the congregation stared as she entered. Mrs. Patterson, the preacher's wife, approached with false sweetness. We appreciate visitors, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the back section. Cassidy understood perfectly. The back section was for people like her. She could either accept segregation or leave. Fighting would only make things worse for Jebediah. Of course. She took a seat in the rear pew, alone. During the service, she noticed how the townspeople avoided looking in her direction. Their message was clear. She didn't belong here. She never would. That evening, frustration drove Cassidy back to the papers scattered across Jebediah's desk. Organization had always calmed her mind. In Philadelphia, she had managed the academy's complex financial records alongside her teaching duties. Numbers made sense when people didn't. She created systematic piles, bills by date, correspondence by sender, legal documents by type. Slowly, patterns emerged from the chaos. Jebediah owed money to the bank, the feed store, and several neighboring ranchers, but his assets weren't clearly documented. You never had your property properly surveyed? She asked the next morning. My father built this place. Always figured I knew where the boundaries were. Legal boundaries require documentation. Cassidy held up a deed written in faded ink. This description is too vague. You could own more land than you realize. Or less. Possibly. But there's something else. She pulled out an envelope yellowed with age. This came from a lawyer in Denver, still sealed. Jebediah frowned. Must be old. I don't have business with Denver lawyers. It's addressed to you, dated 6 months ago. He took the envelope reluctantly. Most legal correspondence brought bad news, but Cassidy's systematic organization had unearthed this forgotten letter from beneath months of accumulated papers. Inside, a formal document bore the letterhead of Morrison, Clark, and Associates. Jebediah read slowly, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief. What is it? Cassidy asked. My uncle died last year. Left me something in his will. Jebediah's voice was barely audible. Property. A silver mine claim. Up near Leadville. He looked at the papers again as if they might disappear. Says it's been surveyed and registered. Just needs final filing with the territorial office. Cassidy's heart raced. A producing mine? Don't know. Uncle Nathan was always chasing fool dreams, but the lawyer says there's been silver found in nearby claims. This could change everything. Could be worthless rock, too. But hope flickered in Jebediah's eyes for the first time since she'd arrived. Cassidy studied the legal language carefully. Her education at Riverside Academy had included basic law courses, necessary for managing contracts with suppliers and staff. This document appeared legitimate. The filing deadline is in 30 days. If you don't claim it properly, the territory can sell it to someone else. Filing means going to Denver. That's a week's travel each way. Then we go to Denver. Jebediah stared at her. We? This paperwork is complex. You'll need someone who understands legal procedures. Cassidy's confidence grew as she examined the documents. I've handled similar filings for the Academy. Property transfers, contract negotiations. It's not that different. You'd do that? We're partners in this arrangement. Your success is my success. That afternoon brought unexpected validation of their partnership. A late storm rolled across the plains, driving Jebediah's remaining cattle toward a damaged section of fence. If they broke through, the herd would scatter across miles of open range. Cassidy saw the danger first. The cattle are heading for the gap. I see them. Jebediah grabbed rope and ran for his horse. I'm coming with you. You don't know how to work cattle. I can learn quickly. The storm intensified as they reached the fence line. Rain turned the ground slippery and treacherous. Jebediah worked desperately to turn the frightened animals, while Cassidy positioned herself near the gap, waving her arms and shouting. A large bull charged directly at her. Instead of fleeing, Cassidy stood her ground and raised her voice in sharp command. The bull stopped, confused by her authority, long enough for Jebediah to rope him and pull him back toward the herd. Together they managed to turn the cattle away from the fence and guide them to safer ground. By the time they finished, both were soaked and exhausted. You didn't run! Jebediah's admiration was obvious. Running wasn't an option. Most women would have been terrified. I'm not most women. That evening they sat by the fire planning their trip to Denver. The legal documents were spread between them like a map to their future. For the first time since Cassidy's arrival, the conversation felt natural. Why did you really leave Philadelphia? Jebediah asked. Cassidy was quiet for a moment. The school board decided my influence was inappropriate for young ladies. Some parents complained about having their daughters taught by someone like me. Their loss. Yes. It was. Denver might be different. Denver will be what it is, but we'll face it together. Outside, unknown to them, Pete was making his own plans. The silver mine claim was information worth sharing, and he knew exactly who would pay handsomely for such knowledge. The following week brought intensive preparation for their Denver journey. Cassidy organized every document with methodical precision, while Jebediah arranged for a neighbor to watch the ranch. Their partnership had evolved beyond mere necessity into genuine collaboration. Each evening, they worked side by side at the kitchen table. Legal papers, surveys, and correspondence formed neat stacks under Cassidy's careful system. Her knowledge of territorial law impressed Jebediah more each day. She understood filing procedures, land rights, and bureaucratic requirements with the confidence of formal education. "You could have been a lawyer," he said one evening. "Women aren't admitted to the bar in Pennsylvania." Her tone held no bitterness, just fact. "Teaching was the only profession that used my abilities. Still is. Not anymore." Their conversations grew easier as the days passed. Jebediah spoke about his wife Sarah and young son Thomas, how influenza had taken them both within a week, how guilt consumed him for surviving when they hadn't. Cassidy shared carefully selected pieces of her past, the academy where she'd taught for 5 years, her father's death, and her family's financial collapse, the hostile school board meeting where parents demanded her removal. "They said I was filling their daughters' heads with dangerous ideas." She sorted papers with mechanical precision. "Ideas about equality and justice. Sounds like you were teaching them well." I thought so. Their shared vulnerability created an unexpected intimacy. Professional respect was deepening into personal connection, though neither acknowledged it directly. Meanwhile, Pete's nightly visits to town had not gone unnoticed. Silas Montgomery received regular reports about activities at the Carter Ranch. The silver mine claim particularly interested the wealthy cattle baron. Silas owned vast holdings throughout the territory. His long-term plan involved controlling water rights and transportation routes through strategic land acquisition. A profitable mine in Jebediah's hands could disrupt those carefully laid plans. "Keep watching them," Silas instructed Pete during a clandestine meeting behind the saloon. "Let me know when they leave for Denver." "What are you planning?" "Insurance, in case their little legal adventure succeeds." 2 days before their departure, Trouble arrived wearing a friendly smile. Silas rode up to the ranch house accompanied by 2 well-dressed men he introduced as business associates. "Heard you might be interested in selling," Silas said without dismounting. "I'm prepared to make a generous offer." Jebediah stepped onto the porch. "I'm not selling. Times are hard. Drought's been tough on everyone." Silas's voice carried false sympathy. "I could take over your mortgage payments, give you a fresh start somewhere more suitable." Cassidy appeared in the doorway. Silas's attention shifted to her with unconcealed interest. "And provide alternative arrangements for your companion." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Jebediah's jaw tightened. "I said I'm not selling. Think about it. This territory can be dangerous for people who don't fit in." After they left, tension hung heavy in the air. Silas's visit felt like a declaration of war disguised as neighborly concern. "He knows about the mine claim," Cassidy said. "Pete?" "Most likely. I should fire him." "Not yet. Better to know what information he's sharing than wonder what a replacement might do." Her strategic thinking impressed Jebediah again. Cassidy approached problems with analytical precision that complemented his instinctive decision-making. The Denver journey began at dawn on a crisp October morning. The territorial capital lay 100 miles northeast through challenging terrain. Cassidy had never traveled such distances, but she adapted quickly to the demands of frontier transportation. Their wagon carried supplies for a week, plus all necessary legal documentation. Cassidy had prepared multiple copies of every important paper, organized in leather portfolios she'd crafted from materials in town. "You think of everything," Jebediah observed as they made camp the first night. "Planning prevents problems." "Is that something they taught at your academy?" "Something my father taught me. He said preparation was the only advantage colored folks could count on." Around the campfire, their relationship shifted subtly. Away from the ranch and prying eyes, conversation flowed more naturally. Jebediah shared stories of his childhood on the frontier. Cassidy described her students at the academy and the satisfaction of watching young minds develop. "You miss teaching." Every day. Maybe you'll teach again someday. Where? What school would hire me now? You could start your own school. The idea hung between them like a bridge across uncertain waters. If the mine claim proved valuable, many things became possible that had seemed impossible before. Denver exceeded Cassidy's expectations. The territorial capital bustled with commerce and growth that rivaled eastern cities. More importantly, it contained federal offices where territorial law superseded local prejudice. At the land registry office, Cassidy's preparation proved invaluable. She navigated complex bureaucracy with the confidence of someone who understood legal systems. Her documentation impressed the territorial clerk. "Everything appears in order," he said after examining their papers. "The claim is legitimate and properly transferred. Filing fee is $50. Jebediah paid without hesitation. After months of scraping together money for basic supplies, $50 felt like a fortune. But if the mine contained silver, it would return hundreds of times that investment. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You are now the legal owner of the Morning Star mine claim." That evening in their hotel, they celebrated quietly. The successful filing meant security neither had dared hope for weeks earlier, but it also meant returning home to face whatever schemes Silas had prepared during their absence. "Whatever comes next, we face it together," Jebediah said. Cassidy met his eyes across the small table. Together. The word carried weight beyond simple partnership. Somewhere between organizing papers and filing legal claims, professional cooperation had become personal commitment. Their first kiss happened naturally as Denver's gaslight flickered through hotel windows. No grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Just two people who had found unexpected connection in the vast wilderness of possibility. Miles away, Pete was lighting signal fires that would bring Silas Montgomery's plans into motion. Their return journey took 4 days through increasingly hostile territory. Smoke columns rose from distant homesteads that shouldn't have been burning in October. Abandoned wagons dotted the roadside like grave markers. Something had changed while they were gone. "Drought doesn't cause that kind of damage," Jebediah said, pointing to a burned barn. "No, it doesn't." They reached home to find their own ranch intact, but their neighbors gone. The Hendersons' farm sat empty, windows dark and cattle pens vacant. Fresh wheel ruts led away from the property toward town. Pete greeted them with unusual friendliness. "How'd things go in Denver?" "Fine." Jebediah unloaded their wagon without elaborating. "Heard the Hendersons sold out while you were gone. Silas Montgomery bought their place. Paid cash money, too." Cassidy and Jebediah exchanged glances. The Hendersons had sworn they'd never sell. Old Carl Henderson had built that farm with his own hands 40 years ago. "They say why they left?" Cassidy asked. "Family emergency back east. Had to sell quick." Pete's explanation sounded rehearsed. That evening, Jebediah rode to the Patterson Ranch to check on other neighbors. He returned with disturbing news. 3 more families had sold to Silas Montgomery in the past week. All claimed urgent reasons for leaving immediately. "Tom Patterson looked scared," Jebediah said. "Wouldn't meet my eyes when he talked about selling. Forced sales. That's what I'm thinking." Cassidy spread a hand-drawn map across the kitchen table. She marked each property Silas had acquired with red ink. The pattern was clear. He was systematically buying land in a wide circle around their ranch. "He's isolating us. Why? Control. If he owns everything around us, he controls our access to water, roads, and markets. The mine claim changes everything, which is why he's moving now." 2 days later, Silas arrived with a larger entourage. 6 men this time, all armed and professional. They dismounted in formation that suggested military experience rather than ranch work. "Heard you had success in Denver," Silas said. "Congratulations on your mine claim. News travels fast. Small territory. People talk." Silas's smile held no warmth. "I'm prepared to make an even more generous offer now. Enough to buy a nice spread somewhere safer." "Not interested. I understand attachment to family land, but circumstances change." Silas gestured toward the empty Henderson place. "Your neighbors found better opportunities elsewhere." "Did they?" Of course. I'm simply a businessman helping folks transition to more suitable arrangements. The threat was clearer now. Silas wasn't just buying land, he was driving people away through intimidation and fear. After he left, Cassidy began documenting everything. Dates of forced sales, names of witnesses, patterns of intimidation. Her teaching experience had taught her that evidence trumped accusations in any dispute. "What are you planning?" Jebediah asked. "Building a case." "Against who?" "Sheriff Mason hasn't stopped any of this." Maybe because he can't, or won't. The next week brought escalating pressure. Fences were cut during the night. Water troughs were contaminated with dead animals. Supplies ordered from town never arrived. Each incident was small enough to seem like bad luck, but together formed a pattern of harassment. Pete's loyalties became obvious when he started arriving late and leaving early. He claimed illness when important work needed doing. His reports to Silas were no longer secret. "You should fire him," Cassidy said after Pete disappeared during a cattle emergency. "Not yet. Better to control what he sees than wonder what a replacement might report." "He's sabotaging us." "I know." The trap sprung on a crisp November morning. Silas's prize breeding bull was found dead in their north pasture, a bullet wound behind its ear. Sheriff Mason arrived within hours, as if he'd been waiting for the call. "That's a valuable animal," Mason said, examining the carcass. "Worth $500 at least." "We didn't shoot it," Jebediah said. "Found on your land, your responsibility." Mason's deputy produced a rifle from their barn. "This yours?" Jebediah recognized his own weapon. "You know it is. Recently fired, too." The deputy worked the action, ejecting a spent cartridge. The setup was obvious but effective. Cassidy watched the proceedings with growing alarm. Legal evidence was being manufactured with professional efficiency. "Jebediah Carter, you're under arrest for theft and destruction of property. This is ridiculous. You can explain it to the judge." As they led Jebediah away in chains, Pete emerged from the barn with a satisfied expression. "Shame about that bull. Valuable animal like that." Cassidy faced him with cold fury. "You did this." "Did what?" "Found a dead bull on our property, same as everyone else." "Our property?" "Well, might not be yours much longer. Silas mentioned he's still interested in buying." "Might be the only offer you get." That evening, Silas visited again. This time he came alone, confident in his position. Jebediah was in jail, awaiting trial. Cassidy was isolated and vulnerable. "Unfortunate situation with your husband." He settled into Jebediah's chair without invitation. "He's innocent." Guilt and innocence are flexible concepts in frontier justice, especially when the evidence is clear. "What do you want?" "Simple business transaction. Sign over the property and mine claim. I'll arrange for charges to be dropped." "And if I refuse?" "Jebediah hangs for a crime that carries the death penalty. You'll lose everything anyway when his estate is seized for damages." Silas placed legal documents on the table. "You have until tomorrow evening to decide. Choose wisely." After he left, Cassidy sat alone in the empty house. The trap was perfectly designed. Accept Silas's terms, or watch Jebediah die for a crime he didn't commit. Either way, she lost everything she'd fought to build. But surrender had never been Cassidy's nature. If legal evidence could be manufactured, it could also be challenged. She'd spent her adult life teaching young women that intelligence and determination could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Tomorrow would prove whether she believed her own lessons. Cassidy worked through the night by lamplight, surrounded by law books borrowed from the town's small library. Her teaching background included basic legal studies required for contract negotiations at the academy. Those half-remembered lessons became her weapon against Silas's carefully constructed trap. The key revelation came at dawn. Cattle theft and property destruction were territorial crimes, handled by local courts where Silas controlled the sheriff. But systematic fraud targeting multiple landowners fell under federal jurisdiction. Different courts meant different judges beyond Silas's influence. She documented every forced sale, every intimidation tactic, every suspicious coincidence. The Henderson farm sold the day after their barn mysteriously burned. The Patterson ranch changed hands hours after their water source was poisoned. A pattern of criminal coercion emerged from what had seemed like isolated incidents. By morning, Cassidy had identified 12 families driven from their land through Silas's systematic campaign. Each sale had been completed under suspicious circumstances, with prices far below market value. Together, they represented a conspiracy that federal authorities couldn't ignore. Her next step required dangerous travel alone. The nearest federal judge sat in Colorado Springs, 3 days hard riding through territory now controlled by Silas's men. But Judge William Blackwood had a reputation for integrity that even territorial corruption couldn't touch. Cassidy packed light, but carried detailed documentation of every crime. She saddled Jebediah's fastest horse and left before Pete could report her departure. The morning gave her several hours' head start before anyone noticed she was gone. The first day passed without incident. Cassidy made good time across familiar terrain, pushing toward the mountain passes that led to Colorado Springs. Her riding skills, developed during childhood visits to her uncle's farm, served her well on the challenging trail. The second day brought trouble. Dust clouds on the horizon revealed pursuing riders. Silas had discovered her mission and dispatched men to stop her. 3 horsemen gained ground steadily, their mounts fresher than hers. Cassidy urged her horse faster, but the gap continued closing. The terrain favored pursuit over escape. Open prairie offered no place to hide, and the mountain passes were still hours away. The chase ended at Miller's Creek when her exhausted horse stumbled and fell. Cassidy rolled clear but knew she couldn't outrun mounted men on foot. The riders approached with professional confidence, hands resting on their weapons. "Ma'am needs to come back with us," the lead rider said. "Mr. Morrow, Montgomery's concerned about her traveling alone." "I'm continuing to Colorado Springs." "No, ma'am. You're not." Violence seemed inevitable until unexpected salvation arrived. A federal marshal's patrol, returning from business in Denver, crested the ridge at precisely the right moment. The 3 riders suddenly faced superior numbers wearing federal badges. "Problem here?" Marshal Thomas Reed asked. "Private matter," the lead rider said. "Lady got lost is all." "Doesn't look lost to me." Reed studied the situation with experienced eyes. "Looks like she knows exactly where she's going." "Federal business," Cassidy said quickly. "I have evidence of territorial crimes that require federal jurisdiction." Reed's attention sharpened. "What kind of evidence?" "Systematic fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy to steal land from lawful owners." The 3 riders retreated rather than confront federal authority directly. Reed escorted Cassidy to Colorado Springs, where Judge Blackwood reviewed her documentation with growing interest. "This represents extensive criminal activity," Blackwood said after studying the evidence. "If these allegations prove accurate, we're looking at conspiracy, fraud, and multiple felonies under federal statute. My husband is in jail on manufactured charges designed to force our compliance. We'll address that immediately." Judge Blackwood assembled a federal posse and departed for Jebediah's town that same evening. Cassidy rode with them, carrying additional evidence gathered during her journey. Witnesses who had been too frightened to speak locally might cooperate with federal protection. They arrived as Jebediah's trial was beginning in the local courthouse. Sheriff Mason had rushed the proceedings, hoping to complete the legal farce before outside interference could develop. Judge Blackwood's entrance stopped everything. "This court is suspended pending federal investigation," Blackwood announced. "All prisoners will be transferred to federal custody immediately." "You have no jurisdiction here," the local judge protested. "Interstate conspiracy creates federal jurisdiction. Release the prisoner now." Jebediah emerged from the jail cell confused but relieved. "How did you manage this?" "Federal law trumps territorial corruption," Cassidy said. "Always has." Judge Blackwood convened federal hearings that afternoon. One by one, witnesses came forward to testify about Silas's systematic campaign. The Hendersons admitted their barn had been burned deliberately. The Pattersons described threats against their children. Other families revealed similar coercion. Pete, faced with federal charges as a conspirator, agreed to testify against Silas in exchange for reduced punishment. His detailed account of the cattle-killing conspiracy provided crucial evidence of manufactured charges against Jebediah. Mr. Montgomery provided the rifle and instructed me to fire it, Pete admitted. Said to make sure it looked like Carter done the shooting. And the bull? Shot it myself on Mr. Montgomery's orders, dragged it to Carter's pasture with ropes. Silas, cornered by overwhelming evidence, attempted one final desperate play. He drew a concealed weapon during the hearing, aiming at Jebediah in a last act of spite. Federal marshals reacted instantly, shooting Silas before he could fire. The cattle baron died on the courthouse floor, his conspiracy exposed and his victims freed from intimidation. Sheriff Mason was arrested as a conspirator. The fraudulent land sales were reversed, returning stolen property to its rightful owners. Judge Blackwood's final ruling cleared Jebediah of all charges and awarded damages from Silas's estate to compensate victims of the conspiracy. The systematic corruption that had terrorized the territory was broken through legal justice rather than frontier violence. As federal authority restored order, Cassidy and Jebediah stood together outside the courthouse. Their partnership had survived the ultimate test. Love built on mutual respect and shared courage had overcome both prejudice and corruption. The mine claim remained theirs. The ranch was secure. Their future stretched ahead like an open horizon full of possibility. 6 months after Silas Montgomery's death, spring returned to the Colorado Territory with renewed hope. The Morning Star mine had proven modestly profitable, yielding enough silver to secure the ranch's future without creating enormous wealth. Steady income replaced desperate survival as Cassidy and Jebediah rebuilt their lives together. The ranch house bore little resemblance to the chaotic dwelling Cassidy had first encountered. Fresh paint brightened the exterior walls. New furniture filled rooms organized with her characteristic precision. Gardens flourished where weeds had once dominated the landscape. More importantly, the house had become a home. Wedding photographs sat beside books on mathematics and literature. Cassidy's teaching certificates hung framed in the main room, symbols of knowledge finally receiving the respect it deserved. Their marriage ceremony had taken place on a warm April morning, witnessed by grateful neighbors whose land had been restored through federal intervention. The Hendersons stood beside the Pattersons as Cassidy and Jebediah exchanged vows under Colorado's vast sky. Do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife? I do. Do you take this man to be your lawful wedded husband? I do. The words carried weight beyond legal formality. Two people who had found unexpected partnership in desperate circumstances were choosing permanent commitment built on proven trust. The community's transformation paralleled their personal growth. Families who had initially viewed Cassidy with suspicion now sought her advice on legal matters and business decisions. Her role in exposing Silas's conspiracy had earned grudging respect that gradually evolved into genuine acceptance. Mrs. Henderson apologized first, approaching Cassidy at the general store with obvious embarrassment. I was wrong about you. Hope you can forgive an old woman's foolishness. There's nothing to forgive. We all make assumptions based on limited information. Some assumptions are worse than others. Other apologies followed. The preacher's wife invited Cassidy to join the church ladies' social committee. Store owners competed for her business rather than refusing service. Children who had been taught to fear her now greeted her with shy smiles. The most meaningful change came when young Mary Patterson asked Cassidy for help with mathematics. Her parents had recognized that their daughter possessed exceptional ability but lacked proper instruction. The nearest formal school was 40 miles away, an impossible distance for daily attendance. Could you tutor her? Mrs. Patterson asked. We'd pay whatever you think fair. Cassidy agreed immediately. Teaching had always been her true calling. Within weeks, word spread about Mary's remarkable progress. Other parents approached with similar requests. Soon Cassidy was instructing 6 children in various subjects, meeting in the ranch house kitchen 3 afternoons each week. You need a proper schoolhouse, Jebediah observed, watching her struggle to accommodate growing enrollment. That would require community support. Ask for it. The proposal met surprising enthusiasm when Cassidy presented it at the next town meeting. Parents recognized the value of local education. Bachelors understood that good schools attracted families and economic growth. Even skeptics acknowledged that educated children benefited the entire community. Construction began in late summer. The schoolhouse rose on land donated by grateful neighbors, built with lumber purchased through collective fundraising. Cassidy supervised every detail, ensuring the structure would serve students properly for decades. Her teaching methods reflected lessons learned through adversity. Mathematics included practical applications for ranch management and business accounting. Literature encompassed diverse authors and perspectives previously unknown in frontier education. History lessons emphasized both local heritage and national ideals. Most importantly, every child received equal instruction regardless of background or family circumstances. The orphaned Miller boy learned alongside the banker's daughter. Mexican children from nearby settlements joined Anglo students in shared classrooms. Education became a unifying force rather than a source of division. The school's success attracted attention from territorial authorities. Educational officials visited to observe Cassidy's innovative methods. Her systematic approach to mixed-age instruction impressed bureaucrats accustomed to failed frontier schools. "Have you considered training other teachers?" the territorial superintendent asked. "Your methods could benefit communities throughout Colorado." "I'm content here. The territory needs educators of your caliber. The territory needs to value the educators it already has." Her quiet rebuke carried weight. Too many qualified teachers had been driven away by prejudice and narrow thinking. Cassidy's success proved that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources if given proper opportunity. Personal fulfillment accompanied professional recognition. She and Jebediah had found the partnership both had sought without knowing its shape. Their love had grown from practical cooperation into deep emotional connection based on mutual respect and shared values. "Do you ever regret leaving Philadelphia?" he asked one evening as they watched sunset paint the mountains gold. "Never. Not even when things were difficult? Especially not then. Difficulty reveals character, both in ourselves and others." Their final vindication came with an unexpected visitor in early autumn. A well-dressed woman stepped down from the evening stage, carrying herself with the authority of education and breeding. Cassidy recognized her immediately, despite the years between them. "Miss Worthington." "Mrs. Carter now, I understand." Eleanor Worthington had been the head mistress at Riverside Academy. "I've come to offer you a position." "I have a position." "The board realizes its mistake. We want you to return as head of mathematics instruction. Substantial increase in salary." Cassidy considered the offer that would have meant everything 6 months earlier. Return to prestigious Eastern education. Vindication from those who had dismissed her. Financial security beyond frontier dreams. "Thank you, but no." "May I ask why?" "I'm exactly where I belong." Miss Worthington departed the next morning, clearly puzzled by Cassidy's refusal. But understanding wasn't necessary. Cassidy had found her place in the vast landscape that had once seemed too big to contain her dreams. Standing on the ridge overlooking their valley, she watched children walk home from school while Jebediah worked with cattle in distant pastures. The land stretched endlessly toward snow-capped peaks, no longer intimidating, but welcoming, big enough to hold whatever future they chose to build together.